Interviews are a mainstay in both film and video production, and often I think not much thought is put into the lighting of an interview. So bring the top door down to about here. My primary objective when working on interviews is to make the person or the people look as good as possible on camera. And then beyond that is to use light and or shadows to create some sort of a mood or environment for the piece. Put this in probably somewhere about here. So what we're going to be doing in this tape is looking at a lot of different lighting equipment and a lot of different lighting techniques that can be used by a person to get a great look for an interview regardless of the location. If you work in news, you know that often there is just no time to even consider lighting when you're out on location. If there's a fire or some event, you're with a reporter, just get it in frame, get it in focus, and you've done the job. But sometimes in news you do have time to change the lighting or affect the lighting when you're outside. And in the corporate industrial world, often you do have time. And there are ways that don't take a great deal of time or effort that you can really change the feel, the quality of the light on the person when you're working outside, rather than just having this hard sunlight rake across their face wherever they may be standing. There are two items that I take with me almost always when I go out on location for these types of shoots. One is a 4-foot by 4-foot silk, a metal frame silk with a 4-foot by 4-foot piece of diffusion fabric that gets tied to it. And the other is a white foam core bounce board. And through the use of a silk and or a bounce board, you can drastically change the quality of light on the reporter or your talent person and take what could be a rather ugly light raking across a person's face in the location and turn into a very pleasant looking piece and making a piece maybe not feel so news-like but have a little production value to it.
Controlling the sunlight while working outdoors can be a challenge. But with a few simple techniques, your on-camera interviews can take on a whole new look. In this first setup with reporter Stephanie Angelo, the hard afternoon sunlight illuminates the scene at a shopping mall. As our reporter begins to work, Bill Holshevnikoff records the image. Our first shot reveals the effects of raw sunlight on Stephanie. Deep eyeshadows and sharp, well-defined shadows around the nose and chin are characteristic of direct afternoon sunlight. To change the quality of the light on Stephanie, a 4-foot by 4-foot silk is set between the sun and the talent. The translucent fabric is tied to the metal frame, which is attached to a grip stand. 3 sandbags hold the stand in place. By placing the silk close to the talent, the large translucent fabric produces a softer, more natural light quality on Stephanie. Another look at our first image shows the hard light quality and deep eyeshadows produced by raw sunlight. Introducing the silk changes the light quality noticeably. The soft wraparound light from the silk evenly illuminates Stephanie, while some shadow value still remains on the left side of her face. To provide fill light for the left side of Stephanie's face, a second grip stand is placed opposite the silk, and an assistant secures a 2-foot by 4-foot piece of white foam core board to the stand. Raw sunlight strikes the white bounce board and introduces a second soft light source for the field interview. Holshevnikoff records the image. A diagram shows the positions of the silk and the bounce board relative to the afternoon sun. The second image shows the effects of using a silk to produce a softer light quality. Some shadow value still remains on the left side of the face, and one might decide to use this lighting effect for the interview. By introducing light from the bounce fill source, a flatter, possibly more appealing look is achieved. Together, the silk and the bounce board provide a very flattering light on our talent. In contrast to the first image of Stephanie illuminated by raw sunlight, it is evident that the use of a simple silk and a bounce board can greatly affect the look of your interviews.
One of the things that I don't like about working in the midday sun or even in the later afternoon sun is that you're working with so much light outside from the sun, is that usually you're working at an aperture and an iris of about f11 or f16, and everything is in focus in the background, especially with video cameras. So you should know, if you don't, that on a video camera, filters number 2 and 4 are neutral density filters that drop in. Usually number 2 is 2 stops of neutral density, and number 4 is 4 stops of neutral density. So if you use the exterior number 4 filter, you get 4 stops of ND filter dropped in. It reduces the amount of light that enters the lens by 4 f-stops. You need to open your iris 4 f-stops to compensate for the light loss. And now you're shooting at maybe 2.8, 2.8.5 outside, and it gives the image a whole different feel. Suddenly all your background has gone into soft pastels and it's thrown out of focus, and it's still recognizable, but it doesn't have that sharp, crisp look, and when it is thrown out of focus, it really helps for the talent to be separated. Now, if you're working in film, it's just a matter of stacking neutral density filters or putting a single neutral density filter on the front of the lens and then figuring that out through your metering and achieving the same thing.
Working with the sun behind the talent can cause exposure problems for video cameras. The use of an in-camera neutral density filter and 2 simple lighting tools can make this shot a quick and easy setup. To reduce the intensity of the bright afternoon sun, a double open-ended net is attached to a grip stand and raised above and behind our talent. The double density net reduces the light striking Stephanie's hair and shoulders by nearly 1 full f-stop. A look at our first image shows Stephanie with the raw sunlight striking her hair and shoulders. Although the ambient light level on her face is acceptable, there is loss of detail in her hair due to overexposure. Closing down the iris would only result in an underexposed image. With the use of the double net, the intensity of the raw sunlight is reduced by almost a full stop, and her hair and shoulders are now within the range of proper exposure for the image. To provide a frontal fill light source for the talent, the white bounce board is positioned just outside of camera frame left. The bounce board is struck by raw sunlight, and it returns a diffused, natural-looking fill light back to the talent area. By using only a net and a bounce board, the sunlight is controlled in a fast and easy setup. A diagram illustrates the placement of the net and the bounce board relative to the position of the sun. Our second image shows the effects of the overhead double net. At this point, Stephanie is illuminated by ambient light only. By introducing the bounce board, the talent is illuminated by a soft, natural source that also helps to provide good separation between the talent and the somewhat busy background. When working outside in the sun, it is not uncommon to shoot at an aperture or iris of f11 or f16. These small apertures can provide too much depth of field for the desired effect. One way that you can reduce the depth of field in your daylight shots is to utilize the internal neutral density filters in your video camera. While filter 3 is your standard daylight balance filter, filters number 2 and 4 provide you with 2 and 4 stops of neutral density. By switching to filter number 4, you effectively insert a filter which absorbs 4 f-stops of light without affecting the color of the image. Consequently, you must then open your iris 4 stops to regain a proper exposure. The effect of using the neutral density filter is evident by comparing this image, which was shot on filter 3 at f16, and this image, which was shot using filter 4 and an iris of f4. Shooting at f4 reduces depth of field significantly and further improves separation between the talent and background. The same effect can be achieved by using external neutral density filters with a video or film camera.
One other area to consider when you're working outside that's really important is background selection. Not only can it make a shot more beautiful if you select the right background, but it can also make it more interesting, or you can include or omit things that can tell the viewer something about the story or the area or whatever. When you're working with a silk, it becomes even more important, because if you're going to use that silk in between the sun and the talent and use that silk as your main source, the silk is going to absorb some of the light, and so you're going to lose maybe up to a full f-stop of light when you drop that silk in. So the talent will look dark relative to the exposure you had prior to putting the silk in. So the talent looks dark, then you open your aperture or your iris up a full stop for a proper exposure of your talent. Once you do that, you open the aperture of the iris, the background gets brighter too. So if you already started with a very bright background and then you open your iris another full stop, that background's going to blow out. So when you're working with a silk, try to find a background with some dark foliage or a darker side, the shade side of a building or a house or whatever you can find that's a little bit darker as your background. Then when you open your aperture for a proper exposure of your talent with that silk in, you'll get a background that shifts up to a nice level that doesn't conflict with the person on camera, and you get a really nice look.
This final setup with Stephanie shows once again how using only a silk and a bounce board can dramatically improve the look of your location images.
Let's move it.
For this piece, the sun is at a back three-quarter position over Stephanie's left shoulder. Bill moves the 4x4 silk as close to the talent as possible without affecting the shot. As the afternoon wind kicks up, an assistant helps to hold a silk while Holshevnikoff records the image. The first image shows our talent with raw sunlight striking the side of her face and nose, while the majority of her face appears dark. Note the selection of a darker background for this shot. The second image reveals the effect of using the silk. Although much of Stephanie's face is still dark, the intensity of the sunlight on the talent was reduced by almost one full f-stop. This allowed for the iris to be opened one stop, and the overall image is now one stop brighter. To provide a soft fill light, the bounce board is moved into position opposite the silk and placed slightly in front of the talent. The diagram shows the position of the silk and bounce board with the sun at the back three-quarter position. Looking at the image illuminated by the silk only, we can see that there is a need for some level of front fill light on the talent. By adding the bounce board, we can see a dramatic difference in the look of the image. The intensity of the fill light can be varied easily by turning the bounce board slightly away from the talent. By comparing the image recorded in raw sunlight, we can see that the simple addition of a silk and a bounce board can make a dramatic difference in your imagery.
When you're working on an interview that's in a location such as a home or an office, one of the things that usually comes up is the problem with windows. Do we include the windows in the shot, and if so, how do we color correct our tungsten lights, or how can I deal with these windows? The way that I usually work around windows, if I'm going to include the windows in the shot, is to work with HMI lights. HMI lights are color temperature balanced to match daylight, or basically to match the color temperature of daylight. And when you're working with those, you can include the window in the shot and not have to worry about color correcting your lights and or the window to get a nice look. HMI lights are also very efficient lights, about 3.5 times as powerful as the tungsten equivalent. So it's a very easy, quick way to work when you're working with windows, and you can get a very nice look very quickly. If you don't want to work with HMIs, or if you don't have the budget for it, the other way I usually go about it is just to black the windows out, either with black fabrics or to close all the blinds and the drapes and get rid of all that daylight, color temperature light, and just deal with your tungsten lights and see if you can work the setting inside the home or the office around so you don't have to show the window. And that way you don't have to deal with all the color correction, and you usually can create a very nice look in a home or office without seeing the windows if you don't have HMI lights.
For this interview with theologian Richard Fragamini, Holshevnikoff works with HMI par lights to match the color temperature of the background window light. To begin the lighting setup, Jorge sets up a combo stand that will be used for the key light source. An Aeroflex 1200-watt HMI par light is then set on the stand. HMI daylight balanced lights require the use of a power ballast. The head feeder cable is first attached to the ballast and then to the instrument. It's always a good idea to tie the cable at the yoke to relieve strain on the connection. This par light has a super wide beam lens on the front of the instrument. Next, a small Chimera light bank is set up with a speed ring that is designed for the airy par light. The speed ring and the light bank quickly slip onto the light and transform a small source into a larger diffused light source. Used as a key light for the talent, this single source is powerful enough to match the intensity of daylight outside the window. A diagram shows the placement of the light bank relative to the talent, camera, and window. The video camera is balanced for daylight. To light the interior background wall in the room, a second daylight balanced 1200-watt par light is placed outside the window and directed at the stone fireplace wall. This par light is fitted with a wide beam lens. As the instrument is turned on, we can see the large background area that the par light covers. To eliminate spill light from the talent's chair, a black nylon fabric is used as a flag and is taped to the inside of the window. Our diagram illustrates the placement of the second par light and how the black fabric eliminates spill light from the talent area. To provide some separation light for the talent's dark hair, a grip stand is placed behind the seat just outside the frame, and the arm is positioned to reach directly behind the talent's head. At the end of the grip arm, a mafer, or super clamp, is locked into position with the spud facing down. An ARRI 650-watt Fresnel lens light is then attached to the mafer, and the barn doors are opened wide. The power cord is strung over the arm of the grip stand. The stand is raised to a height of approximately 5 feet, and the light is directed toward the talent's seat. The tungsten balance light is then turned on. The doors are boxed in horizontally, and a single sheet of opal frost combined with a sheet of half-blue correction gel is clipped to the barn doors. The frost diffuses and increases the working size of the light source, while the half-CTB gel color corrects the tungsten light halfway toward the daylight balance of the HMIs. Color correction and gels will be discussed in detail in another volume of this series. To help eliminate any lens flare from the separation light, the top barn door is extended by clipping on a piece of black wrap foil. Also, to break up the light on the background wall, a small branch is clipped to the grip stand near the window. Looking at the diagram again, we can see how the use of the grip stand allows the hair light to easily be placed above and behind the talent. With the lighting nearly complete, Holshevnikoff directs the talent to his chair and explains the need for a few minor additions to the setup. To reduce the light level on the front of the talent's white and green shirt, a small black flag is positioned in front of the light bank, while Jorge sets a grip stand to secure the flag's position. The grip head is tightened down, and the flag is locked into position just outside the frame right edge of the shot. Holshevnikoff then places a chair for the interviewer, and a small white reflector panel is brought in to provide fill light for the shadow side of the talent's face.
Tighter. Okay, straighten it out just a touch. Richard, look straight ahead. It's too far. Straighten it back. Come back. There you go. That looks nice. All right. Thank you.
A final check of the lighting completes the setup for this interview.
Okay.
The diagram shows a very simple 3-light setup. The key and background lights are daylight balanced, and the hair light is tungsten with half-blue correction gel. The final image of our talent reveals a very natural lighting style for an interior home interview. The first image of our lighting evolution shows the talent with key light only. Prior to turning the key light on, the talent was only a silhouette against the brightness of the window. The daylight outside is filtered from the overhead trees, so it is easy to illuminate the talent area to match the intensity of the background window. Often it is necessary to place a sheet of 1 or 2-stop neutral density gel on the window to reduce the brightness of the window for the shot. The addition of the hair light adds a small highlight on top of the talent's head, which helps to separate him from the dark area of foliage behind the hair. By placing the small white reflector panel on the shadow side of the talent's face, soft light from the main light source is bounced back to reduce the density of the shadow area. The amount of fill light can be easily adjusted by slightly turning the bounce panel. Finally, the addition of the background light brings the walls and flowers to life and completes the lighting of our image. Working with the HMIs and the soft diffused light from the light bank are the keys to creating a natural look when working against windows.
When I am working with HMIs, I usually only bring maybe 2 pars to light an interview at an office or a home, and obviously that can't take care of all the lighting needs in a particular shoot. So I'll mix tungsten lights with HMI. I'm exposing for the daylight color temperature basically. On a video camera, I'm on the daylight balance filter. But if there's an area in the back, a plant or a wall I want to do something with, any special I need to set, I'll just use tungsten light. And I'll just let it be its tungsten color, the warm tungsten light, as opposed to the daylight color. And I think that mix of warm and cool light is a really nice thing, especially in a home. So I'm never afraid to mix tungsten and HMI in a particular setting. The other thing is that with HMIs, obviously, and if you're only dealing with two lights for your background and your key light, it can go so fast. You're saving so much time and effort only dealing with two lights. And because HMIs are so much more powerful, 3.5 times more powerful than the tungsten equivalent, and they only pull the same power as the tungsten light, you're not going to be needing 8, 10 outlets and looking for extra circuits and blowing circuits in a house or an office. It's so quick and easy to come in with two lights and do the whole job and then just use a little extra tungsten light. They do cost more, but I think the extra expense is worth it to have them on the set when you're dealing with windows. It speeds up your job a lot more. Now, if you can't use HMIs, either for cost reasons or they're just not available to you, usually I just black the windows out if I have to light with just tungsten, and I'll find an area in the room that I can use as a background that won't show any edge of the window or anything, and I just light it as I would on a studio set. And in this particular setup, it's lit for a two-camera interview where the second camera is on the interviewer and you're just cutting back and forth between the two people. It's a very simple setup using two C-stands, and the key lights also serve as separation lights for the other person, and then we just have a soft front fill, so it's a very, very simple lighting setup for a two-person interview.
If you can't work with the windows in a room, try to select a background that works for tungsten lighting. This simple setup lights both the talent and the interviewer with only 3 instruments and can work for a single or two-camera shoot. To eliminate the daylight from the interview area, black nylon fabrics are used to cover the large windows in the room. With the windows blocked out, Holshevnikoff brings in the first key light. A 650-watt Fresnel light is hung on a Mayfer clamp at the end of a grip arm. The light is positioned over and slightly behind the interviewer's seat, and the grip stand is placed out of the way of any potential shots. The light is turned on at full flood, and Holshevnikoff then adds a small double sheet of light frost to the bottom of the barn doors. This acts to reduce the intensity of light on the head of the person seated just below the light. A diagram shows how the placement of the Fresnel light and the use of the frost on the barn doors enables a single light source to serve as both the key light for one talent and the separation light for the other talent. A second airy Fresnel on a grip arm is then set opposite the first key light. This instrument also will serve as both a key light for one seat and a separation light for the other. The light is raised to a height of approximately 6 feet, and once again, the grip stand is placed out of the way of any potential camera shots. With the barn doors set in the vertical position, the double frost is added to the bottom of the doors. The frost is positioned to ensure the proper division of raw and diffused light. With the talent now seated for a lighting check, we can see the placement of the 2 Fresnel lights. A look at the diagram shows the beam spread of each instrument and how the 2 lights work as both key light and hair light for the 2 people. To create a large diffused fill light source, a medium Chimera quartz bank is set up with a dedicated Totalight ring. This speed ring, which can work with up to 3 Lowell Totas, has only one 750-watt Totalight attached. While the omnipresent Jorge sits in as interviewer, Holshevnikoff sets a stand for the light bank. Although the light bank is quite large, this lightweight source will provide soft, shadowless fill light for both talent. The light bank is raised to a height of approximately 6 feet, and the rear flaps are closed to control spill light from the back of the light bank. The single Totalight is then turned on. Looking at the diagram, we can see that by using this simple setup, only 3 lights are needed to provide key, fill, and hair light for 2 people. Also, the top barn door and each Fresnel light can be used to control the amount of spill light that reaches the background of each shot. To accentuate the stone wall of the fireplace, Holshevnikoff decides to add a separate light for the main talent's background. A 300-watt Fresnel light is set high on a stand and the barn doors are used to control the beam spread on the wall. A look through the camera informs Bill that he should place just one more light source for a background effect. Because the fireplace screen is a metallic surface, it is dependent upon reflections of windows or light sources in order for it to show up as gold metal. The small silk will serve to create a reflection on the metallic screen. Behind the silk is a 250-watt Lowell Pro Light. With the fire going and the lighting complete, Holshevnikoff takes one final look at his shots. The final diagram illustrates the placement of both the background light and the small silk. When the interview is complete, a single camera could be easily moved to pick up reverse angle shots of the interviewer without having to relight. The final image shows that even when working with hard key lights, you can achieve a nice looking interview in a home or office without having to battle daylight from the windows. The first image of the lighting evolution shows the effects of the main talent's key light only. Notice how the barn doors are used to control the light so that only the talent is illuminated. Height and placement of this key light are critical to ensure a pleasant look on the talent. The second image reveals the effect of turning on the interviewer's key light without adding frost to the bottom of the barn doors. At this point, raw light is striking the main talent's hair, and the separation highlight is slightly brighter than Bill prefers. The addition of the large light bank serves two functions. It provides a soft, shadowless fill light for both talent, and it creates a specular highlight on the fireplace screen that reveals the color and texture of the metallic cover. Without the presence of this large, diffuse source, the fire screen would appear black as it does behind the talent's head. The fourth image shows the effect of adding the small piece of light frost to the bottom of the barn door. The intensity of the hair light is reduced without affecting the interviewer's key light. Adding the 300-watt background light brings color, texture, and depth to the image. And finally, the use of a small silk with a 250-watt light creates a secondary specular highlight on the fire screen that further defines the background and improves separation between the talent and background wall. Small stages usually offer nothing but challenges for a lighting director. But by using controlled lighting instruments and by carefully selecting the placement of each light, you can add a great deal of production value using very few instruments. Controlling spill light and using colored gels can also make a big difference in your studio programs.
When you're working in a very small stage doing interviews, the big issue is light control. So usually you're working with hard light, Fresnel lens lights, and you do need barn doors. Barn doors are so important when you're working, especially in small areas. But if you're working with any sort of hard light, you've got to have barn doors on the lights. So in working with Fresnels in a very small stage for a two-person interview, the big idea in working with hard light is light placement. Where you're going to place that light is going to have everything to do with how that person is going to appear on camera. Now, one of the big issues for me is getting the lights down lower. Often people are working on a 13, 14-foot grid, and all the lights are coming in at such a steep angle because the space is so small that you're ending up with heavy shadows under the brows, heavy, long chin shadows under the neck. And so what I try to do is get the lights dropped down on extension arms or trombones, whatever you want to call them, dropping them down to maybe 8, 9 feet, and then getting a much more appealing look from these hard lights as to wherever you place it. Also, when you're working in a very small stage, I try to minimize the amount of instruments I'm using so I don't have light going everywhere all over the stage, because usually that back wall is very close to the setup, very close to the actual seating area where the talent is. And so you have to control all that spill light. So where you place your fill lights, where you place your key lights, and where that spill light is going on the set is critical to keeping those back walls free of spill light. And if you can achieve that, then you can start to add some real fun to the shoot. Then you can give a real look, adding a lot of production value with just some colored gels and light on the background walls to give it a feeling of a show and not just two people sitting on a stage.
To begin the lighting setup, a pipe clamp is attached to a 1,000-watt Fresnel lensed light. The light is hung on the stirrup of a drop arm, which enables the light to be lowered below the grid height of 14 feet. After the light is firmly secured to the drop arm, a safety chain is attached to prevent the light from accidentally falling to the studio floor. The light is then lowered to a height of approximately 7 feet above the floor.
good. Lock it in. Can you reach over and get
The barn doors are opened and set in a vertical position. With the light set at full flood, Jorge focuses the instrument at the camera right talent's chair. Working from the studio floor, Holshevnikoff directs Jorge to set the barn doors to control any spill light.
Terrific. That's where we'll put the opal.
A single sheet of light frost is then added to the left barn door to diffuse the raw light that strikes the camera left chair.
Right. Let's watch. I think it's covering a little too much right now. Maybe you can reset the top one a little. If you can, stretch it this way.
The light frost reduces the output of light by approximately 1/2 stop.
Great.
A diagram shows how the light serves as a key light for the camera right talent and as a fill light for the talent at camera left. This fill light is most noticeable when the camera left talent looks out to the center camera position. The studio size is 25 feet by 30 feet. With the first key light set, Jorge rigs a second 1,000 watt Fresnel on a drop arm and lowers the instrument into position. This will serve as a separation light for the close-up shot of the camera left talent. The barn doors are opened and boxed in horizontally, and Holshevnikoff then directs the focus of the instrument. The light is turned on, and a single sheet of medium frost is clipped to the barn doors of the light. This frost will serve to slightly increase the working size of the source, and the steep angle of the light will help to localize any spill light.
Keep pushing.
A look at the diagram reveals the placement of the separation light and how the frost helps to control the beam spread. The third light set on a drop arm is a 1,000 watt Lowell DP light with an extra small Camera light bank. This soft light source will serve as a separation light for the two-shot and a fill light for both talents' close-ups. From behind the source, we can see how the light bank is mounted to the DP light. To help control spill light, Jorge attaches a collapsible ribbon louver system to the front of the light bank. These lightweight louvers velcro onto the front of the source, and in this setup, it will also prevent lens flare at the center camera position. The diagram shows the placement and the beam spread of the light bank. Placing the diffuse light source behind the talent enabled the source to serve as a fill light and a separation light for both seats. Also, because the light bank is facing away from the studio walls, the walls remain free from any spill light. After the second key and separation lights are set, we can see the final lighting plan for the talent area. Only 5 lights are used to provide key, fill, and separation light for 2 talent on a 3-camera shoot.
Lighting for multi-camera shoots on a stage is always a compromise. So what I try to explain to directors is that I'm going to light for the talent to look their best on their close-ups, on the 2 side camera angles. And then I'm going to make sure they look good from the center camera angle. But that's usually on a 2-shot or a wide shot that's used to establish a show. I try to talk directors out of the idea of starting the program on a close-up from the center camera, because the lighting just isn't going to look as good as it does for the side shots. When you're working with hard light especially, it's very difficult to make someone look as good no matter where they turn. So I try to say, look, keep your wider shots on the center camera, and let's concentrate on where you're going to spend most of your time in the program anyway, from those 2 over-the-shoulder shots or the 2 close-ups. So I set my key lights to light for the close-ups. That's where I put them. I put them so that person on their close-up shot looks their best. And then I make sure on the 2-shot, when they turn out to that center camera for the opening or the close or a break, they look fine. Maybe there's some minor shadows somewhere, but it's acceptable from a center shot. But the close-up is where is your money shot, and that's where I really concentrate all my lighting efforts. Now, the important part of the 2-shot or the center camera shot is the idea that that's where you can put your production value in. You usually have a much wider shot, so you've got open wall space or set areas where you can start to do some fun things with light and maybe with some colored gels. And the only thing I try to do with the backgrounds of the close-up shots, side camera angles, is just stay consistent. So if there's a color from the center camera angle, if you've got color, I try to stay consistent with that color in backgrounds of the 2 side camera angles.
To light the center of the coved studio wall, a 1,000 watt Fresnel is hung directly on the grid. The light is secured and turned on. And Holshevnikoff then directs Jorge to set the barn doors to create a shaft of light in the corner of the studio.
There you go. And now just tilt the whole light down. We'll see if we can kind of create a God shaft down the middle. You can bring the doors out a little wider. There you go. Uh-huh. Okay,
With the
Mario,
light
let's see the
set,
color of that gel
a
up
single
there.
sheet of pale blue
Great.
gel is then
And,
held up in front of the
take it
light
away.
to check the effect.
Back in.
The color is approved, and the gel is clipped to the barn doors of the light. A 2,000-watt Fresnel is then fitted with a pipe clamp hanger, and the instrument is placed on the grid to light the camera right side of the background wall. Once the light is secured and powered, a single sheet of medium blue gel is added to the light. A duplicate setup is then set for the camera left wall. The lighting is complete as the talent takes their seats for the taping. The diagram illustrates the placement of the background lights in the studio. A look at the final image from the center camera position shows the effects of the colored gels on the light gray studio wall. An evolution of the two-shot begins with our talent illuminated by the two key lights only. The second image reveals the effect of the frosted separation lights set primarily for the close-ups. The addition of the small light bank set between the talent adds a good separation light for the center camera shot. At this point, the talent lighting is complete. Note how the studio gray wall appears near black prior to adding the background lights. With the center background light turned on, the image is brought to life. The light blue shaft of light also helps to direct the viewer's eyes to the talent. Finally, the addition of the two outside background lights provides the image with balance and a splash of color.
There's a couple nice things about this setup, especially when you're working in a very small confined stage. Again, you have to be conscious of where your spill light's going. So by placing the key light where I did, I'm doing two things with it. I'm putting it in a position down on the drop arm where it makes the talent look really nice for their close-up. And I'm also cheating it out toward the center camera as far as I can to still get a good look up on the close-up. But when they turn to the center camera, it also works as a key light for the center. So it's kind of split between the two positions, their close-up camera and the center camera. Now, the nice thing about placing it there also is that any light from that, any spill light from that goes directly behind them and almost out of the shot behind them down to the side. Once you've established this key light, you have a little shadow value on the back side, the upstage side of their face, so you need to fill that in. And if possible, I'm always working with larger, softer sources for fill light because I don't want to throw a secondary shadow across their face. So by using an extra small Chimera light bank and placing it on the upstage side, I'm throwing a nice soft fill light across both talents' faces. And it also does a couple of other things by placing it there. Any spill light from that big soft source is coming downstage and away from the back walls, so I don't have spill light contaminating the back walls. And then also, as both talent turn toward the center camera, this big soft light also serves as a hair light for that center shot.
To analyze the lighting for the two side camera angles, we will look at a lighting evolution of our talent Claire. Our first image shows the effect of the talent's key light only. Note the hard shadow edge transfer from the small Fresnel light source. The addition of the opposite talent's key light adds only a small amount of fill light to the side of Claire's face and hair. This is the light that is passing through the frost at the edge of the barn door. The frosted 1,000-watt separation light adds a nice highlight to the top of the hair and provides excellent separation from the dark background wall. Turning on the center light bank adds a soft fill light to the shadow side of the hair, face, and neck area on both talent. With the talent lighting complete, notice once again how the background wall appears black to the camera before adding background light. Finally, the addition of the blue gelled light adds a little production value and fun to a program without a set.
For a lot of corporate and industrial interview programs especially, there isn't much of a budget for set pieces. And obviously on this set we have 2 chairs and a table and a carpet on the floor, so that's not much of a set. So when you don't have production value in your set, you can get production value through lighting. And the key in this kind of a small stage area and with very light gray walls is that you have to control that spill light again so that light gray wall appears black to the camera or very near black to the camera before you add any light to it at all. And if you can achieve that, you're going to get very, very saturated colors on your background walls. Now, if you do have spill light on your walls, it's just going to desaturate the colors. A very deep blue would turn out to look like a powder blue. But if you can keep all that spill light off and have that wall appear near black before you light it, you're going to get very, very saturated colors. And through some interesting light placement and different uses of colored gels, you can add a lot of production value to a very simple set in a very small stage through lighting.
To examine the effects of colored gels on a gray studio wall, we will begin with the background light turned off. By turning on the 2,000-watt light, the true tone of the wall is revealed. The top barn door on the light was used to create the fall-off at the top of the frame. At this point, the wall is neutral gray, and it requires only the addition of colored gels to create any color that you might desire. Once again, the key to creating saturated color backgrounds is to control the spill light. If you're using a light meter, the background should read at least 2 to 3 stops below your subject exposure prior to adding the background lights. Working on a larger interview show with many more guests can be intimidating. With the exception of a few different lighting instruments, just follow the same basic principles as you would for a smaller program, and you should achieve similar success. This segment will be divided by several diagrams so that the lighting plan for different areas of the set can be examined independently. The first diagram shows the placement of the key lights and the separation lights for the guests. There are 8 guests on the program, and 1 key light was set for each couple. The 4 2,000-watt Fresnel lights are each hung on a drop arm and lowered to a height of approximately 9 feet above the studio floor. Each light is set at full flood, and the barn doors are used to control the beam spread of the lights. Placement was determined by where the talent would be looking on their close-up shots. A look at several close-ups reveals the effect of the single key light. The hair lights are set up in a similar manner. 1 1,000-watt Fresnel is used for each couple. The lights are hung directly on the grid and each light is set at half spot. The second diagram shows the placement of the fill lights for the guests and the colored gelled lights on the background flats. The fill lights consist of 2 4,000-watt soft lights that are also dropped down on extension arms. Due to the fast fall-off of light from soft lights, the 2 large diffused sources are set closer to the talent than the key lights. The large fill light sources produce a nice shadowless fill light for each of the 8 guests, but they are critical in the lighting for black skin. Black skin relies on specular form, or reflections of light sources, so the large soft lights help raise the tonal value on darker skin. To eliminate spill light from the background wall flats, a large black teaser is hung approximately 6 feet in front of the soft lights. A teaser is just a large, lightweight flag made of fabric or foam core board that can be positioned anywhere you may need to control spill light on the set. The dark gray background flats are each independently lighted with a 2,000-watt Fresnel. Each light is on a drop arm lowered to a height of 8 feet and set at full flood. Medium blue and lavender gels were then cut for gel holders and slipped into the barn doors of the lights. The final diagram shows the lighting for the host of the program and for the coved studio wall behind the host. To light the host, 2 2,000-watt soft lights or zip lights are hung on drop arms and lowered to a height of approximately 9 feet. These 2 sources serve as key and fill and allow the host to move around a bit without any noticeable lighting changes. To provide hair light for the host, a 1,000-watt Fresnel is hung on the grid and set at half spot. And finally, to light the coved studio wall, 3 2,000-watt Fresnels are hung on the grid and set at full flood. The same blue gel that is used to light the background flats behind the guests was added to these 3 lights for the studio wall. Once again, by using only a minimum of instruments and controlling unwanted spill light, you can easily add production value and save time in your setup. Bill Holshevnikoff has some closing comments.
Lighting interviews is always a challenge. You have different locations, different people on set. There's always something new to deal with. But the ideas that are put across in this program are hopefully what people can take with them. Whether a particular lighting plan that we've presented here works exactly for their program is not the question. It's a matter of the principles of the idea of key light placements and placing fill lights in places where the spill light doesn't cause a problem that you have to deal with in some other way, and in using as few instruments as possible to create a really nice look. Too often, I think people go out and start to set up lights in one place and it creates a problem, they put another light to cancel that problem and another light to cancel that problem. And if you actually sit down and think about your light placement, and especially when working with hard light, with Fresnels, it can really save you a great deal of time. You end up setting only a few instruments and then maybe a soft fill light, and you're there. And if you can work quickly like that, I think you'll find, because of the efficiency of your work picking up, what you'll end up doing is having more time to sit back and look at your work and analyze it and make the little changes that make a big difference and really get a nice look out of your programs.